Routines. They're really good in theory. They offer the promise of allowing you to get more work done while also spending more time on the things that you enjoy. However, if you're anything like me, you may have struggled with actually getting a routine that you can stick to in the past. You may have had a routine in the past you've made that you've been able to follow for one day, and then for the following 2 weeks, you've sort of just burnt out. Or if you've been really unlucky, you follow the routine for 0 days and you've been burnt out. I've had some experience with both cases over the past few years, and I've made a lot of mistakes when making routines. And it's my hope that in this video, I can show you what I've learned from those mistakes and help you make a routine that works for you. And I really do stress the point of a routine that works for you as opposed to it being the other way around where you have to work for it and it feels really constraining. So the first part of this is that you need to be pretty reasonable with where you're at the moment. And to give you an example of this, I'm actually going to show you a previous routine that I had made a few years ago. So as you can see on the screen, I had the genius idea to do 10 hours of work every day. And not only do 10 hours of work, but also split them into two 5-hour chunks. So this is just kind of insane looking at. The problem with the routine came from the fact that this was just way too much of a jump for the level that I was at. I went from studying a few hours a day to suddenly kind of just expecting to be able to study for 10 hours a day. Additionally, the fact that these were 5-hour chunks of work meant that I could really just kind of wake up and completely dread the day before me. Now that example came from a spreadsheet called Attempt 5, and to further illustrate the progression of my genius throughout the years, I actually have another example called Weekly Template version 5, and in this you can see a different sort of problem. The problem with this spreadsheet was that I expected to kind of just have all my limbs melt as I morph into a ping pong ball and bounce between 15 to 20 different activities in a day, which really shows the importance of prioritizing what you're going to do with your limited amount of time and energy. Now, although morphing into a tiny aerodynamic sphere would go poorly for me, it actually might work really well for some other people. And this kind of brings us to the next section of being able to make a routine that you can actually stick with. And that comes from matching the way you work with the way that you, well, work. Over the years, through some experimentation and research, I've identified 3 main work styles that all vary a bit in how often they switch between working and having a break. The first group of people is really well suited to sort of switching quickly. This is the sort of group that would benefit a lot from having Pomodoro style timers where they've got 20 minutes on of just intense focus and then a 5-minute break. And they're able to switch between a lot of different subjects in these 20-minute segments. And then the last group of people who like switching between stuff the least are more represented by the deep work sort of style, which is having 90 minutes to 2 hours to really just get past their initial friction to get some momentum and really focus on what they're working on. These were the 3 common sorts of working styles, and I hope that you are able to find something that either you relate to or get an idea of what might work for you. The good thing about knowing of these different options is that you can sort of experiment with these and see what works best for you. In my case, the funny tomato timer method didn't really work, but what did end up helping me focus was those longer work periods. So again, it's all about experimentation. After you've been working for a while, you're going to end up having a break. And it's sort of important that you kind of hold yourself responsible for going on the break and don't skip it, as well as choose something that actually works for you during the break. And what I mean by this is that you're going to want some sort of activity that's preferably a little bit different to what you're doing. Maybe it'll allow you to stand up a bit. And also, you don't really want to go into like a dopamine sink, something like Reels or TikTok or whatever. Because when that happens, it's a bit of a 50-50 flip for either you get stuck there and you spend way too much time, or you just end up being more tired than when you started your break. So you're going to be looking for a sort of break that energizes you a bit. If you've been sitting down a lot, you could stand up and go for a bit of a walk, and that'll allow you to sort of clear your head and also think about what you've been learning. I've juggled in the past, which is just a nice activity that you can kind of have your brain just run around in a little pen while you relax. And I've even had some people you might have seen online, they'll just watch an anime episode. Again, I probably wouldn't consume anything, but you can personally experiment with what works for you and see if you're able to keep that sort of focus. In forming a routine that ultimately works for you, there's a huge focus on this experimentation, as I've said like 100 times, and there's also a big focus on the subjectivity of it. The truth is that you're a special little snowflake, and your routine has to be a special little routine that's made for you. Another thing that I'll mention is that if you've been trying to stick to a routine and it hasn't been working for a long time, there may actually be elements in the routine that you've sort of been told that you enjoy or like, but don't actually align with the goals that you have internally. So that's just a little thought to keep you up. Before concluding, I'm just going to go over some little tips and tricks that I've picked up. The first one is going to be having different areas for things. Again, if you've been looking online, you've probably seen this advice come up, and it's still very good. If you have any sort of library near you for doing work, then I'd highly recommend making use of it, or even in some cases, going to a different room in your house, or literally just going to the other side of your desk. The second bit of advice I might have is for your work periods, you could just the night before or even in the morning go over the few things that you'd like to do today. There's a little bit of fluidity in what you're sort of doing in these work periods, so you don't really need to be stuck to something that you've set for yourself a week ago. Speaking of fluidity, again, the routine is meant to supplement your life. So you can have free time, you can have days off. You don't need to stick to it. Sometimes really beautiful things just happen that you haven't planned for, and you don't have to just imprison yourself to miss out on these things. Something else that may help in making a routine while you're going through this more rocky phase is having some sort of period to reflect or maybe even journal just about the things that are working for you and the things that are kind of sucking a bit. An example of this actually is I was really trying to be one of the cool, crazy guys that wake up at 5 a.m. and just run over like a field of broken glass. But I ended up finding out that actually I work better after I've just had my full 9 hours of sleep. And also, I work a lot better when I've had a full night of sleep and have some time in the morning to just relax a bit and do things like meditate and exercise. But again, you may find that you work a lot better when you wake up in the morning and you just get straight to work. And that leads us to the conclusion of the video, which is to say that making a routine that you can stick to depends a lot on being able to fit that routine with the way that you sort of function as a person. Being realistic with where you're at, with how much energy and time you have, with the way that you work, the sort of things that energize you during breaks, these are all going to come together to give you something that you can really stick with. Experimentation and reflecting on how things are going is going to go a really long way. And you may at some point even have to reflect on how the goals that your routine serves actually relate to you and if that's something that you want in your life. With all of that covered, I hope that you've been able to learn a thing or two from my own mistakes and that this will be able to help you to craft a routine that works really well for you. Thank you for watching my PowerPoint presentation.